Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to another Sunday of When Black Women Gather. I am so glad that we are all here this week to talk about such an important topic, Black fathering and mental health. And I have to say that this was the brainchild of my two co-hosts today, Michelle Burgess and Kilthea Roberts. They have been responsible for a series that we've done in the last year on mental health. Topics on mental health, and they came up with this one. I think it's fantastic. I see it as the beginning of several conversations, launching of several conversations that we need to have with Black men. I want us to talk about fathering and Black male and Black female relationships. And, you know, today we're going to talk about fathering and mental health issues, and I'm sure it's going to delve off into other areas. And feel free, we have 3 clinicians here, and if you don't take advantage of it, shame on you. Our format's going to be a little different today because we've invited men into our circle, because this is a conversation that we want to have with our men. So while women will, you know, the sisters, of course, we want to hear from you, but today we're going to defer to our brothers first. So the format will be that our clinicians will speak. And like I said, Michelle and Kilthea will handle that. And then we will take immediate questions, Q&A from our male participants if they choose. If you don't choose to speak, that's fine. But if you ever wanted sisters to hear you, this is your opportunity. So don't throw it away. And as with all our conversations, I guarantee you respect. I do not guarantee you comfort. I think that when we have conversations and if a conversation is considered uncomfortable or something that's difficult, in my mind, it's a necessary conversation. So ask the question, ask it in a way that you want to be heard, but being mindful of being respectful. And that's all that I have to say today. Thank you all for attending. I'm going to mute myself and remove myself from the spotlight and turn it over to my wonderful, wonderful, wonderful co-host, who I'm so happy to have. You guys are, well, y'all just don't know. And anybody else who has ideas about what you want us to cover in this circle, this is not my forum, this is our forum. So please, you know, reach out to me and let me know. You can do the same thing that Kilthea and Michelle have done. So thank you, ladies, and I'm signing off.
Okay, so thank you, Ms. Higgy. Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle, and along with Kilthea, we are going to introduce the speakers via their bios. Then we'll be led by Dr. Michael Hannon into our topic for today. So Dr. Hannon is an award-winning counselor, educator, and researcher, a practicing counselor and author. He's an associate professor of counseling at Montclair State University, a mental health counselor at the Center for Marcus, and the co-founder of the nonprofit organization Greater Expectations Teaching and Advocacy Center with his wife, Dr. LaShawn Hannon. Dr. Hannon is the winner of the 2021 Black Mental Health Educator of the Year from the Black Mental Health Symposium, and the lead author of the 2020 Article of Year from the journal Counselor Education and Supervision. He's the author of over 30 publications and has been cited over 400 times. His 2022 edited book, Black Fathering and Mental Health, and overall research about the mental health of Black men and fathers has been highlighted in a range of media outlets, including NPR, National Public Radio, New York Times, Autism Speaks, Thrive Global, Huntington Post, and Waymaker Journal. Dr. Hannon earned his doctoral degree in counselor education and supervision from Penn State, an educational specialist degree in counseling services from Rider University, and master's and bachelor degrees from the University of Delaware. Kilthea?
Hey, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm introducing Dr. Alfonso Ferguson. He has many credentials. He's a licensed mental health counselor in New York and Florida. He's a licensed professional counselor in New Jersey. He's an approved clinical supervisor and national certified counselor. Dr. Ferguson prides himself on providing culturally responsive counseling services to underserved communities. Dr. Ferguson earned his doctorate of philosophy in counseling from Montclair State University and now holds a position as a core faculty member in the counseling department at Saybrook University. As an educator, Dr. Ferguson contributes by preparing counselors in training to be culturally responsive to their work with intersectionally minoritized communities. Dr. Ferguson intentionally teaches all courses through a social justice lens. He believes that if we effectively prepare counselors of tomorrow, we will all more likely have a better future. Dr. Ferguson has gained a variety of experiences in individual family counseling services to those who are experiencing psychosocial stressors, family issues, and mood disorders. He has strong interest in work with LGBTQ community and the Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC community struggling with mood disorders and psychological stressors. His clinical experiences include case management, inpatient and outpatient therapy, private practice owner to provide supervision and consultation. Dr. Ferguson is the founder and executive director of Good Work, spelled WERK, a group psychotherapy private practice where he and his team provide counseling services to individuals, couples, and families living in New York, New Jersey, and Florida. Welcome.
And I'm going to introduce Dr. Tyce Nadrich. He's an assistant professor and graduate program director for the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Program at Malloy University. He is a licensed mental health counselor in New York, board certified counselor, and approved clinical supervisor. He also serves as the coordinator of clinical training at Balance Mental Health Counseling in Huntington, New York, where he supervises counselors in training and provides clinical services to the community. He's an active scholar focusing on racial identity and Black paternal mental health. And with these introductions, we bring you three dynamic brothers to share their knowledge and experience on Black masculinity, fatherhood, and mental health. Please help me welcome them all. Take it away, Dr. Hannon.
Thank you so much. Someone can give me a thumbs up so that indicating that I can be heard. You can hear me. If you, awesome. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Shout out to When Black Women Gather. A special shout out to Michelle Burgess and Ms. Higgy and the team that coordinates this. It is, both uniquely and timely with respect to its importance. So we're just glad to be here. And I'm glad to be here with my brothers and friends to hopefully contribute something to you in the conversation about Black men and our mental health and ways that we can be the right kind of help for us and each other. And so I want to make sure all the things that were read about me, those that, that's kind of like the script that I give folks if they ask me to come and share something. But most importantly, I want to make sure I say one, again, my name is Michael Hannon. Friends and family call me Mike or Michael. So whatever you're comfortable with. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm the proud father of Avery and Niall Hannon. My father is Byron Hannon, who thankfully is still among the living, whose father was Lafayette Hannon, whose father was Claude Hannon, whose father was John Hannon, whose father was Green Hannon, who was a slave. And I appreciate all of my lineage and heritage, and that is just one side of my family, my paternal side of my family, and I want to make sure I acknowledge them. I'm a Black man, I'm a husband to a Black wife, and I'm a father to two dope young Black children, young adult Black children. I'm glad that I can say I'm a Black counselor and counselor educator, and in community, not just with y'all, but with my two friends here, my dear friends. And so I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you in community. And so Alfonso, Tyce, and I, we tried to structure our time and our comments so that it would be linear or certainly create an arc. So I'm going to start attempting to talk with us or share a little bit about both my lived experience and the research that I've done and the professional experience I have in working with Black men clients and Black father clients in particular. And I want to start by what I would call the basics about Black men and masculinity, recognizing that our notions of masculinity can be super narrow, and we have to be open and willing to be appreciative and affirming of all the ways masculinity shows up as it develops and as it becomes healthier. And And so I want to pose this thing to you, and I'm only going to talk for anywhere between 7 and 10 minutes before I turn it over to Dr. Ferguson. But I would ask you to encourage this, to consider this. When I was a doctoral student at Penn State University, and y'all know I got Jersey roots, so shout out to everybody from Jersey and welcome from the Garden State. When I was a graduate student at Penn State, I had a professor. She was teaching like our intro to professional counseling class. And she had tons of clinical experience, had been seeing clients for years in her career. And what she said has literally still resonates with me some 10 or 12 years later. And she said this. She said, in my experience, boys and men are socialized to engage with two primary emotions, lust and anger. And girls and women are socialized to engage with every other emotion except for lust and anger. And while I can appreciate how we all may have different experiences with how we've been socialized to express ourselves, I think there's at least a modicum of truth there that in many spaces, in our communities, in our families, our extended families, that boys are given the license and the green light and permission to express lust. And let me be clear, I'm talking about heterosexual lust and anger. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to express your anger. It's okay to chase that girl. It's okay to touch her, even though she hasn't been asked to be touched. It's okay to approach her, even though she hasn't been asked to be approached. And these are the things, to me, in my observation and in my clinical experience, that tell me that there's work to be done in supporting our young Black men, our boys, and as they transition into manhood. And so if we think about the ways that boys and men are socialized to engage with the world around them, consider what we call in mental health and behavioral health and in organizational leadership, emotional intelligence. Now, there's a whole lot of fancy definitions of emotional intelligence, and I could be super clinical, but if I had to just drill it down in the simplest way possible, if I was explaining this to my nephew, I would say emotional intelligence is the evidence of you and me being able to, one, precisely identify how we feel, and with some accuracy, and communicate it verbally and otherwise. And with some accuracy, identify how other people are feeling. So it does take some inference, it does take some observation. And if we can build and support our young men, our Black boys, to increase their emotional intelligence, find the words to express how we're feeling in healthy ways, and be able to hopefully read the room and the people that we love, particularly when we're in conflict, to determine and tap into how other people feel and then respond to it appropriately, I think we're winning in that moment. So when I think about the notion of Black masculinity and the basics, some of you, I imagine, are familiar with Dr. Naim Akbar. Dr. Akbar is a luminary in Black mental health. He's a psychologist trained at the University of Michigan, and he wrote this book some years ago called Visions for Black Men. You may be familiar with it. It was published in 1991. And Dr. Akbar made a distinction between three representations of personhood among men. He said, there are males, there are boys, and there are men. Males refers to our assigned biological gender, and we're driven primarily by impulse, greed, and pleasure. Boys have a little bit more insight and awareness, but they're driven primarily by convenience and the desire to be catered to. And men, in our most evolved functioning, are able to exercise discipline over those desires, over those greeds, over those preferences, to execute a vision that creates a legacy for our families and our communities. So when we think about the men and the boys in our lives, and if there's any credence to what Dr. Akbar is saying and has communicated in his research and his writing, we have to be patient in the evolution of our men. recognizing developmentally things are going to show up in some spaces and in some timelines and show up differently at another point in their lives. And hopefully we're the right kind of help to help and support their evolution in their manhood. So I want to share a few things and assert to you that the way Black men and boys are socialized, I would categorize them in three ways. We're either socialized to perform. You may have heard the term performative masculinity. We're socialized to protect ourselves. So some of the ways that we function in spaces is literally a protective measure. I don't want to be targeted. I don't want nobody to play me. I don't want to be disrespected. And as a result, my behavior is a way to protect myself. And then as I talk with Dr. Ferguson and Dr. Nadrich, as we kick it and we talk trash with each other, there's also some maybe evidence of boys being socialized to be entitled. And that just comes by way of gender roles and how boys and men are typically at the higher point of a hierarchy than girls and women. And so it's very likely that boys will say things and demonstrate behavior like, that's mine, she's mine, I can take that, right? There are some moments when we have evidence to suggest that maybe boys are socialized to be entitled, but certainly they're socialized to perform a certain kind of masculinity, a narrow form of masculinity, lust and anger, and to protect ourselves so that if we're in spaces, we're not victimized. There are 7 domains where masculinity is performed most frequently. And this is particularly important as we think about Black men specifically in work, right? What does it mean to be a good employee and to have a good work ethic, to go provide for my family, provide for my community, provide for the people that we love and I love? It's performed in education. What kind of student am I? Am I a smart student? Am I acting like the white students? Am I assured in who I am academically? We perform it in the context of our family. This is what a good husband is. This is what a good nephew is. This is what a good son is. This is what a good uncle is. This is what a good other father is. We perform it with respect to our sexuality and how that's expressed. And there are stereotypes about Black men's hypersexuality. And some of those things can be reinforced by the company we can keep sometimes and our willingness to be challenged about what that can look like. It's represented also in the way that we care for ourselves and our health. What does it mean to go to the doctor? And do I have any reticence or hesitation in going to the doctor? Because going to the doctor and asking for help, that's not what real men do, right? It's evidence in crime, and when I say crime, I say like maybe not so pro-social behavior and what it means to do that. And it's also masculinity is evidence in the way that we represent ourselves. How do I show up in a particular space? And so if we think about those 7 domains, I would share with you that in our socialization, we're taught, like many of you, like Black girls and women, we're taught and we internalize certain scripts and narratives. So I want you to consider this as you think about the Black men and boys in your lives. There is a script that we're socialized with to be strong and silent, that true masculinity, real manhood, real Black manhood is evidenced by being able to suffer in silence. I either totally disengage from my community and isolate myself, or I disengage or I engage only with a select number of people if I choose to do that. But my masculinity is demonstrated by my silence, and strength is associated with silence. And thinking about how helpful that may or may not be. Another script is the tough guy script, right? My masculinity is demonstrated by conveying that I'm immune from being hurt or being in pain, so that if I express pain, then I'm less of a man. One other script I'll share with you is the give them hell script. It's really like the disruptive script. My masculinity is demonstrated by masking my discomfort and stress by distracting as a person, right? I'm so uncomfortable and detracts from my pain that I'm experiencing. And then the last one I'll talk about is the Playboy script, which I referenced earlier. Is this hypersexual, heterosexual demonstration of my manhood. I'm not a man if I can't give you my body count, right? And I'm using that, candidly, and hopefully it doesn't offend folks, but you know what I'm talking about. And then, again, Dr. Ferguson and Dr. Nadrich and I talk, what is it about possibly another script about entitlement? Go take that. That's yours. You can have that. You don't need permission. And my manhood and my masculinity is both affirmed and encouraged by those 4 scripts. And those are the things that I've learned literally over the course of my life, that these are the behaviors that demonstrate masculinity, Black masculinity, good, strong masculine behavior. And what I would share with you is all behavior communicates. As mental health professionals, Tyce, Alfonso, and I know, all behavior communicates. So even if you don't have the words, even if I don't have the words, even if I shut totally down, then my behavior is communicating something. And so do I have the skill? Do I have the coaching? Do I have the support? Do I have the therapeutic support to help me identify how I'm feeling, to be able to communicate what it is I'm actually experiencing? The last thing I'll share is this. When we think about Black masculinity and manhood and our mental health, there is good reason, just like Black people all across the world, all across the African diaspora, there is good reason and understandable reason for us to be stressed in ways that other folks aren't. The social, political, and educational and employment realities for Black men, if we take 3 contexts, 3 domains, let's just talk about college graduation rates. I know there are a lot of highly educated, highly formally educated people in here, but the National Center for Educational Statistics said that Black male college graduation rates was 36% in 6 years, compared to 52% for Latino male students and 63% for white male students. Incarceration rates, the National Institute of Justice reported that 1 in every 15 Black men are incarcerated, compared to 1 in every 36 Latino or Hispanic men and 1 in every 106 white men. And in unemployment rates, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that unemployment rates for Black men are at approximately 6%, as compared to 3% for white men and as compared to 4% for Latino men. So there is righteous anger that exists for Black men and their ability to deal with these things, these realities, while attending to their mental health in ways that are healthy, given the possibility that they've not been coached to do it, influences their mental health and well-being. And so with that, I'll be quiet. I'm gonna turn the floor over to my brother Alfonso so he can share with you moving forward.
Listen, Mike, you didn't set it all, so we could just pack up and go. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge like my gratitude for being in this space. I'm going to say the thing that we're all probably thinking. I'm probably one of the younger people on this call, give or take some of you folks. I mean, Helen, I don't know, I may be giving you a run for your money. But with that, I think there's also this aspect of my educational background and upbringing and where I navigate the world in most spaces where I'm somewhat connected to technology, right? And so with that, there's oftentimes I bring a lot of references that I see on social media into the space and have conversations on it, because social media don't do a lot of bad, but there is some good there, which I really appreciate. And so one of the first things that I'll start off with is a quote that I saw on Twitter, and it reads, "We cannot become what we want to be by remaining what we are." And it just speaks to like the power and necessary and importance of the conversation that we're having today, because I think as a society, as a community, as Black people, we want to be better, we want to do better, we want to get to a better place. But there's sometimes what I've seen with a lot of my clients, their traditions, their like things that we've learned during our formative years that have kept our mind frame in a certain place, and it doesn't allow for spaces to have conversations like this and beyond. And I say that because I think about there's a client that I'm currently seeing, a Black woman in her mid-60s, and she was prompted to seek counseling by her daughters. She had 2 daughters and they're all doing very well in counseling. She's seen a lot of growth and progress in that. And so they supported her in finding a provider, and we got connected. And for our first couple of sessions, every couple of minutes she said, we don't do things like this. We don't tell other people our business. Your business stay within the family, stay within the house. You handle things within the family. So she had to work up to getting comfortable to sharing some of the challenges that she's experienced throughout her life and some of the challenges she's experiencing now. But for her, it was so ingrained that our business is our business. Don't tell nobody else your business. Don't air out your the family dirty laundry, if you will. And I think that speaks volumes to where we can go, how we can grow, how much further we have to grow as we continue to normalize conversations around mental health and wellness. And so with that, I'll kind of navigate into, I'll share some statistics with you all because I do think it's important. Again, not knowing where we are and where we're going as things continue to progress. So I have some stats that I want to share with you all from the Mental Health Association .org, and they do every 10 years, they do a general census. And for the census in 2018, they reported that, and we may all know this, 13.4% of the country identify as Black or African American during that time. Of that 13.4%, 16% of them reported having mental illness within the past year. And I think as I preface and share these numbers, what I immediately think about is this is 2018. So what was happening during that time? It was the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. It was the height of, every couple of months we were seeing people who look like us, our brothers, fathers, uncles, sisters, who are being like brutalized by police brutality, and oftentimes it being recorded, right? So there's like this being blasted all over the world. And one of the things that I thought about, and that was happening at that time, but now fast forward 5 years, we're at the tail end of a pandemic, hopefully, knock on wood, we're at the tail end of a pandemic. And so a lot more has happened. A lot more has happened within the Black Lives Matter movement. A lot of us have lost family members. A lot of us have like visually seen how the healthcare system isn't always supporting and promoting and protecting Black folks. And then I say isn't always, and I'm being really generous here, right? Because oftentimes they're not. And so when I think of that, I think of, though these numbers are these numbers, I wonder how much more of us are reporting severe and persistent mental illness or challenges with navigating wellness, right? Within that 16% in 2018, that was about 7 million folks. And that's like the size of like 3 of our major cities put together. We're talking Chicago, Houston, and maybe Philadelphia or something. So it's that many of us who are navigating mental illness challenges. Some of the report kind of shared Black folks navigating major depressive disorder between the year of 2015 to 2018. There was an increase in that. And for youth, it went from it increased for young adults, it increased for adults, meaning folks who are 25 to 49, it increased. And then I don't have any numbers for, older generation, but I also think about that other piece, the client that I'm working with who shared, we don't do this, we don't share this information, we don't put our businesses out there. So I imagine how that's also being impacted. Between 2008 and 2018, the suicide rate, whether it was thoughts of suicide, plans of suicide, or attempts of suicide, had increased within young adults from 6% to 9.5% of the population reporting they've had either an attempt, a thought, or anything of that sort. So I think when I think about the context as to where we are and the conversation we're having right now is, as we're increasing conversations around mental health and awareness, we're also seeing numbers increase for various reasons. And it's part of what Dr. Hannon said, or Dr. Hannon has shared around like the socialization of being a Black man and navigating the world and how that can impact our mental illness. But honestly, being a Black person and navigating the world and how that can impact our mental illness. I wanted to spend some time, the time that I do have, sharing some barriers, some signs, some things to look out for when you're working and supporting your community, the Black men in your community, you as a Black man, taking inventory of yourself and what's coming up for you. And then I'll share a little bit of resources, and then, we'll open questions and I'll add more resources as they come come along. So some of the barriers that I've found in research has been, one, the lack of Black mental health providers, right? To some extent, it is an extension of like keeping it within the family, being able to see someone who look like you that you can share an experience with, and you don't have to explain what does that stare in the grocery store look like, or what does it mean when your boss is talking to you a certain kind of way, because we have that similar experience to some extent, but that's not that added layer of having to explain yourself for someone to understand your lived experience. So oftentimes, a lot of my clients, and I'm sure these two men can attest to that, they seek me out because I am a Black man. Half of the conversation we could just cut to like what we need to work on, because they don't have to explain too much to me, because I get it. Or at least there's a belief that I get it. 12.3% of Black adults have had doctors visit, and they've either been misdiagnosed, or they weren't properly assessed, or they weren't properly treated. So they may have gone in for one thing and come out with another. And if that one thing could have been connected to their mental health and their well-being, that isn't the focus, right? So, it's thinking about how oftentimes the healthcare can pathologize us and put us in boxes, but not take care of us in the ways we need to be taken care of. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. Hannon is being the right kind of help. I don't know if the healthcare is always the right kind of help. In addition to that, one of the things that came up in the study that I'm sharing some of the information from is 11.5% of Black or African Americans don't have healthcare, or are uninsured. And this was reported in 2018, compared to 7.5% of our white counterparts. So, insurance is a huge thing as well, and I feel like we can get into that, but I know you all have had this conversation before, and you guys know the stories and the experiences there, and you're probably living it yourself. Even someone like myself who have multiple jobs and have insurance, I also have difficulty like finding a provider that I'm comfortable with, that takes my insurance, and that is like competent and ready to work with my population or me. I think some of the other barriers that really are interesting and starking for me are like the stigma and the judgment associated to either navigating mental illness and or seeking counseling. I remember, I'll share a little bit about myself. I remember a couple of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I just graduated from school. I was living in New York City. I was having a really difficult time as a therapist, as a novice counselor. And I was talking to my parents, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to see a therapist because I'm really struggling with anxiety. And as some of you guys may have heard earlier, I'm of Caribbean background. I was born in Jamaica, migrated to the US when I was about 9 or 10. And, I'm sharing this information with my father, and he got really, really nervous. He got worried because his idea, his concept of seeking mental health counseling was if someone was crazy or experiencing delusions or hallucinations of some sort. So for me to be that's my go-to, or this is what I want to do to take care of myself. His idea, whether my issue was at a 2 or a 5, he took it to a 15 because he didn't really understand, because he subscribed to the stigma of, well, only this group of people will seek counseling of any sort. Because other than that, and kind of going back to what Dr. Hannon shared too, we've been socialized as men, as boys, to stay silent, handle it on your own, like you got this. So seeking help meant something different. In addition to that, one of the things that really jumped out for me was some of like the data that's out there. And so on average, 84 Black men commit suicide on a weekly basis. Research also shows that Black men are more likely to commit suicide or have a suicide attempt than a Black woman. 75% of all suicides are male. And I think even within that, the hardest part of it all is men are less likely to seek support. So even though we have higher risk and higher numbers, we're less likely to say, hey, I need help. I did a training a while back, and I think one of my biggest takeaways of it from people is that people of color often have difficult time saying a couple of things or expressing a couple of things. And one of those things are, I need help. Simply just saying, I need help. And we'll in a slide or two, or in a little bit, we'll talk about the ways in Black men, some common ways. Not every Black man express, I need help like this, but some common ways in which how Black men manage or navigate mental health and or work through like depression. Another one that's really difficult for people of color, very generalized here, is I'm sorry. Saying I'm sorry. Right? And so as I think about that, I think about, I want you guys, or I invite you guys to think about the men in your life and the way, again, some of these things may show up or may not show up. As I mentioned before, things that I want you guys to be mindful of as it pertains to like maybe identifying some signs of the men in your life or yourself, managing or struggling or navigating mental health or depression or anxiety, is oftentimes a lot of the contributors to that for men and their resistance to overtly express that. And I know Dr. Hannon has shared some of this already. And one of those things is the adultification of Black folks, right? This idea of them or us having to grow up earlier than we actually need to, right? And I know you guys have probably seen it. I know you guys have experienced, I've experienced it, not necessarily having to be the man of the house at a young age, but having responsibility that children don't have to have or shouldn't have to have at a very young age, right? So you may not be paying a bill, but you may be cooking dinner for your siblings or so on. And I think I was managing the house at 12. And that was appropriate and that was cool. And I didn't mind it. I wanted to support and help my family. But it also, I wouldn't say robbed me of an experience, but I had to grow up really fast. I had to take on responsibilities really fast. And you see that sometimes within immigrant families, especially families where English is their second language. Then another thing that often comes up that promotes Black men to maybe not acknowledge or overtly express their emotions is oppression, racism, or even a dehumanization of Black men. And we've seen that happen throughout history. Some of the signs that I've noticed in some of my clients, and even some of my clients who are Black women who are in relationship with Black men, sometimes share these signs and symptoms. Oftentimes, Black men in general may struggle with, again, expressing their emotions, but it may express it in different ways. That one of the things that, or a couple of things that I think about immediately is, yeah, we have the criteria for depression, sadness or, being isolative or, changing appetite or changing sleep. But then when I think about how that is combated by how Black men have to show up in society, whether it's go to work or take care of families or have these responsibilities and these added pressures, it may show up a little different. They may do all these things. They may get the sleep, they may eat the meals, they may interact, but they may be experiencing depressive symptoms as well. One of the, before I even go into some of those different symptoms, what immediately comes to mind is the recent loss of Twitch. The dancer that was on the Ellen show, and, he was making TikToks 24, 48 hours before he passed. And on social media, in the media, he looked like all was well and he was having the time of his life. But he was also struggling. And I don't know him, right? He wasn't my client, he wasn't my family, I don't know him, but I don't know what the space looked like for him to be able to have some of those conversations of what he was struggling with and how he was expressing himself. And oftentimes there's a numbness that Black men portray with when they're navigating their mental illness. So when I say numbing behavior or numbness, it's like disengaging or withdrawing. I need time for myself. I just need a couple of days and I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna be good. I just need time for myself to sit with my thoughts. Sometimes the numbness can look like excessive substance use. over drinking or, heavy inebriation or utilization of like drugs. Sometimes it's like excessive TV watching, where it's sitting in front of the TV and vegging out, right? I want to watch mindless TV, something I don't have to think about because this is my way of escaping. And they do that for an extensive amount of time. Whether it's every day after work, I'm going to be in front of the TV for 6 hours watching TV and vegging out because I had a long day or whatever the case may be. Sometimes it's playing video games. Sometimes it's, being on social media and getting in that loop of just strolling and strolling and strolling and strolling. And sometimes it's risky behavior, whether it's being promiscuous or whatever that case may be, but it's risky behavior. Other ways that I've seen in my practice and research has shown that Black men tend to deal with depression and other mental illness is the freeze response. A lot's going on. I can't think. I'm having thought blocks. I just can't process right now. Or there's delayed processing. This thing happened today at 5, at 10 p.m. I'm like, oh, wow. And that just hit me really hard, right? 5, 6 hours later. Sometimes it's physically being frozen, not being able to move, not being able to say anything, not being able to talk. And other times it's just like slow movement. It was a long day. I'm drained and I'm just moving like this, right? So these are sometimes things that we want to be mindful of or look out for within our community, in addition to, the general depressive criteria, when I'm speaking specifically for Black men and how some of the symptoms can manifest in a cultural way. Want to, again, going back to my thoughts on social media, and one of the things that I came across, again, on TikTok, no, I mean on Twitter, it's this, someone posted this thing, it said, my therapist said something in our last session that I couldn't get out of my head. The therapist said, Black women don't often recognize that they're struggling with depression or anxiety. Instead, they think they're failing. And I thought that was really interesting because it really spoke to, for Black women and for Black men, because I see it in my clients as well. It spoke to this idea of mental health or mental challenges, depression or anxiety isn't an option. It got to be something else. It can't be that. I actually can't struggle with that. It's these other things. And, or I've been socialized to believe that that's not it. I'm not enough. I need to do more. And I often do see that with a lot of the clients that I work with on a regular basis. This idea of making sense or making peace with your depression, your anxiety, or other mental health challenges that you may be experiencing, and being okay with that being it, and not that you're not enough or you're not doing enough. So as I speak to this room, and I love that there's so many people on the call, I think this is fantastic on a Sunday evening. There are some things that I want to leave with y'all to kind of work with this community. And I feel like I've taken up a lot of time, so I'm going to speed through it a little bit. So I'm thinking about how you can support the Black men in your life. As a Black man, how can you seek support? And or as a Black man, how you can support other Black men? I think about curating or cultivating safe spaces or brave spaces for Black men to acknowledge all their feelings, all their emotions, and be okay with that, right? Normalize Black men experiencing all the emotions. I know Dr. Hannon shared a couple, but we all know that there's a whole emotion wheel. And there are times where I pull that out with my session, and in my session with my clients, I'm like, what emotion is coming up for you right now? Take your time, read through the wheel, and then you let me know. Because I don't think we're normalized or socialized to express but 2 or 3, as Dr. Hannon shared earlier. Another thought that I have is check on your people, right? Again, in social media, I saw this post recently, check on your strong friends. Because we all have this idea, and then we all also present outwardly as strong because we want to keep our business to ourselves or within our family. So we all look like we're strong. But we're all struggling here and there. We all have our moments. So what does it look like that for the strong to check on the strong? So check on your people. Identify communities where you can be a resource for each other, where you can have those authentic spaces to just be you. I think as people in general, especially as Black people, we tend to be very fragmented because we don't have a lot of spaces where we get to be our whole self at once. So I'm gonna bring a piece of me to work, and I'm gonna show up like this, and I'm gonna do my job. I'm gonna be authentic enough, but I'm gonna also be very protective of me. So you're not gonna get 100% of it. So you're gonna get a piece here, a piece here, a piece there, but where are the spaces where you get to be whole? So how do you cultivate that for yourself? And also, how do you support someone in cultivating that? Be a source to give and to receive. As Black people in general, and I'm speaking to my Black women here especially, well, I know you guys are givers. You women are givers. It's really easy to give, but also be a space to receive, because you can't do it by yourself and you can't do it alone. Be intentional about your self-care. Oftentimes when I talk to clients about self-care, I'm talking about your physical self-care, your psychological self-care, your emotional self-care, your community self-care, and your soul self-care. And those are my 5 pillars of self-care. And oftentimes folks are just doing their best to juggle those 5 and make sure you're taking care of yourself. What I see in a lot of clients is they may be doing well at 2 or 3, and then there's 2 that's just not happening. And it creates a gap for them. And so I'm gonna stop here because I want to give Dr. Nadrich some time. And I've taken up some time, but I just want to leave you all with that. There are absolutely resources out there, and I want you guys to not only be intentional in taking care of yourself, but also as a client, right? And when you're working with a therapist or you're looking for a therapist or a provider, be clear on what you need to ask them. What do I need to know from you as a provider to know that I will be safe with you? And what I empower prospective clients with is you have every right in this consultation call to ask me questions, as I am going to ask you questions to get to know about what you need. You know, things like what does those letters behind your name mean? What is your therapeutic framework? What does a regular session look like? What is your specialty? Have you worked with Black men before? Right? You know, how do you use social justice in your practice? So just a few questions that I want to encourage you guys to ask folks to better understand or assess if I'm going to be safe here, because your safety is important too. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Nadrich now.
Good Lord, I simultaneously love and hate following both of these brothers here, and I think you all can see why. In some ways, what I'm going to hope to do, I don't want to say a number of minutes because then I'm a lie and probably go either shorter or longer, but what I'm going to hope to do in this time is take all the things that we've spoken about and connect it to, in many ways, fatherhood and mental health, because that's sort of what we've been talking about this whole time. And we're kind of like conceptualizing or kind of creating this whole bubble about fatherhood and mental health. And to do this, I actually want to start with some anecdotes about me and what drove me to be where I am with these brothers that I'm with, and subsequently with you all. You know, when I first became a counselor, I shared before we started this whole thing that I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Queens, and one of my first jobs, one of my favorite jobs as a young counselor, was I was working in juvenile detention. And Dr. Hannon spoke earlier about incarceration rates that were probably for adults specifically. But what I will say is that at least in New York City, the juvenile detention rates are demographics are no different. If anything, they might actually be more heavily skewed toward youth of color and Black youth. And when I was working with mostly young Black boys and some young Black girls, but mostly young Black boys in juvie, what drove me to be in a space like this, to become an educator, to become a supervisor, was when a young boy was about to be shipped upstate. So going from short-term detention while legal stuff was happening to long-term detention because his case was closed. He looked at me and asked me a question that I don't think I'd ever been asked before. He said, "How come I've never had a counselor be the way that you're being with me right now?" I didn't have an answer. for that question. And I mainly didn't have an answer for that question because I didn't think I was doing anything abnormal or anything exceptional. And when we talked about it more, he just talked about what I would, in hindsight, looking back on it, just saying that I treated him like a human. I treated him like a person. I let the brother talk. I heard what he had to say, and I honored who he was without judgment, because I was able to see myself in him. For context, this is a separate person. I met a young boy who was in juvenile detention who was there being held because he was arrested for, and I hope y'all don't think too much of my youth as I say this, but he was arrested for riding on the back of a bus. So in New York, I don't know if folks do this otherwise, but sometimes you might hop on the back of the public bus and get a free little ride. Thank you for putting your hand up. Appreciate that. And when I heard him say that, that was because I did that. That means that I could have been. This was an awakening moment for me, because what it said to me was, there's nothing different. I think I knew that, but hearing that in that moment really emphasized, there is absolutely nothing different between me and these young brothers here. The only difference is they got caught. That's the only difference. They got caught living a life that a lot of people live. And bringing that forward, I'm emphasizing that something that I know is common between the three of us, but Dr. Ferguson said it specifically, was as a counselor, what we find is in every call, most of the calls I get, I'm getting calls because they are either looking for a man, looking for a person of color, usually a Black person, or looking for a man of color specifically. And that speaks volumes to the way that our mental health system is and the deficits therein. I'll also just do a quick aside, is I saw someone, and forgive me, there was a lot of messages at this point, and then I pulled my own slides up, so now I'm not looking at the messages no more. But someone posted up this idea of seeking therapy for their sons. And as I'm looking at this, I'm going, oh, we got to do something other. And the moment I saw New Jersey, that reminded me, well, we actually can't, I'm not even accessible to you because we can't do across state lines because of the way that mental health, between our healthcare system is all types of messed up, that I am legally not allowed to be a counselor in New Jersey, even though I exceed all the amount in terms of education requirements, all that stuff. And we don't have a system, although it's sort of in the works right now, we don't have a system that allows counselors to work across state lines. And within that, I want to add an extra layer, and I know I've had specific conversations with Mike Hannon about this. While we have this desire where folks are looking specifically for me, for us, we simultaneously have, I'm going to use the word resistance in air quotes. I'm going to say resistance. Hesitance might be a better word, or ambivalence for Black men to work. I have tried my best, and I've shared this specifically with Mike multiple times. I've tried to put pro bono, free of service, or pay what you want groups for Black men, for Black dads out there. And I've historically not been able to get consistent attendance to keep the group alive for a prolonged period of time. I'll get a couple of weeks and then it'll start to fade off. And I know other people have been more successful than I am, but that's part of it. And as I bring it into fatherhood, something that really stood out to me, Dr. Hannon was talking, we mentioned Dr. Hannon's book earlier, and I am a father of 2 young children, which also explains why I'm so tired. And I had the privilege of contributing to that book when before my daughter, my eldest, was born. And I don't think I've actually said this out loud to Mike before. I'm grateful for the space that it gave me to process what becoming a father was, because in the absence of that book, I'm not sure I would have processed that in a direct and meaningful way. I wouldn't have had that dialogue out loud with myself, and I wouldn't have had that dialogue with my father, because I don't have that type of relationship with my father. My father wasn't part of my upbringing, of my maturation. So who was I going to have those conversations with, if not in some ways myself and the community of folks who have blessed us by reading that book? And I share all of this to highlight our collective focus on Black men's mental health and Black fathers' mental health. And in some ways, I'm going to ground a little bit of data that I don't think is necessary, but I'm going to say it aloud anyway, that, back in 2014, we were fortunate enough to get some broad level data on fatherhood in the US. And again, this is almost 10 years old now, but what we can say is that there are over 74 million men identifying as fathers, meaning ages 15 and above, as of 2014, with over 72 million of those men identifying as biological fathers. That's a shout out to other fathers who are doing work, who are not necessarily biological fathers, but are doing father work. Something that's notable about the Black community specifically is when we look at ages, and this is more of a statement of understanding where support might be needed. 3% of Black men identified as fathers between the ages of 15 and 19, which is higher than all other racial counterparts. And by the ages 20 to 29, 25% of all Black men are identifying as fathers. I share this only to highlight that this is a lot of people that we are talking about. And the idea of not focusing on a lot of people in general, let alone people who come with, who have the historical oppression that are Black people and Black men, the idea of not focusing on those folks is a disservice. That's a disservice by us as mental health professionals, and we need to make sure that we are doing that type of work. And I'll speak a bit to some of the research that we are doing right now. We collectively embarked on a journey of trying to understand the narratives of Black dads, specifically through the perinatal period. When we talk about perinatal, it's a bit of a broader term, a little bit inclusive depending on who you're talking to, but the way that we conceptualized it was, we're talking about from conception to a year or two after birth. We wanted to understand what's going on for Black dads during this time? How are Black dads starting and emerging into their fatherhood identities? And this couples with a lot of the research that Dr. Hannon and other folks have put out there of trying to understand fatherhood and Black fatherhood. And while we are very early in the work that we've done, we have spoken with Black dads. We are now collecting survey data from Black dads. I got a survey. I got a little flyer if folks want it after we're done with this stuff, because help me talk to some Black dads. I'll be very happy with that. But what I will say, though, is that as we're talking with these folks and we're reading the data and we're looking at how people are responding to our surveys, some of the most important things, they're not going to sound unfamiliar compared to what we've been talking about so far, is the ways in which Black dads are navigating how they learned to be Black dads. The narratives that they carry with them are highly important and influential in terms of how they become Black dads. Also, when there are lacking narratives, that matters just as much as existing narratives. Sometimes we're hearing conflicts in narratives, meaning my parents did this, but I don't want to do that. How do I erase that? How do I not be that? On the other side, we're hearing, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing. Something else that really stood out in terms of the narratives, and this is something that essentially everyone that we're talking to has spoken about, is the weight of the stereotypes of what it means to be a Black dad. The pressure that Black dads talked about not endorsing the stereotype, not being the deadbeat dad, not being the one who doesn't show up to the play or to the game or to the extracurricular, the not being that weighed so heavily on some of these dads that the pressure of just showing up is anxiety, it's depression, it's so heavy because the thought of missing something and being pointed to and just saying, I knew it, I knew you wasn't gonna, or I knew you were one of, that idea weighs on Black fathers. Some of the things that I think are directly related to some of the things we talked about already is this idea of the way in which some of those scripts that Dr. Hannon spoke about earlier today, this idea, and for that matter, Dr. Ferguson talked about it in his clinical practice as well, is that strong and silent type or the tough guy type. The idea that dads had within them that their family comes before themselves, their partners, their pregnant partners and their children all come before themselves. And the idea of sharing of what's going on in here, the stress of what it means for me to try to support my partner throughout pregnancy, or try to conceive when we're not conceiving when we want to, or try to be the right kind of help after when we're in that newborn phase. And I'm not convinced there is anything that's the right kind of help at that point, because we're trying to stay alive. The idea of taking away any energy in that moment to focus on you is almost being viewed as a burden. So what these Black dads are doing sometimes is they're isolating. They're suffering in silence, to quote Dr. Hannon earlier, or they're just presenting themselves as immune from pain. Is that I got this, I'm gonna hold it down because I have to hold it down. And when we think about how this impacts their day-to-day lives, I really like the metaphor, and I know y'all are new to me, but these brothers know that I'll drop metaphors every chance I get. In many ways, I view this metaphor as Black dads wearing a weighted vest. And that weighted vest sometimes is an extra 10 pounds, an extra 20 pounds, an extra 40 pounds, an extra 60 pounds. There's a weighted vest of their concerns, of their needs, that is just weighing them down, and it's stuck inside of them because they have either not been socialized to or do not feel safe enough to share that with the world, to address and we talked about this idea of masculinity, to address how their mental health and their needs intersects with their ideas or their teachings and their learnings of masculinity. The idea that if I go to a mental health counselor, I'm perceived as weak, or I'm perceived as less of a man. Bringing that into fatherhood. If I don't show up the right way as a dad, I am not a man. I'm not doing my job as a man. Even thinking about folks who I've spoken with in my practice, but also through the research, this idea of what it means to conceive or aid in the process of pregnancy. If I can't get my partner pregnant by month 4, month 5, I am less of a man. There's this idea in the ways in which our narratives of what we are supposed to be in the world sometimes collide with what it means to exist in the world. And that's where that weighted vest comes from. And if we cannot find the space to take that vest off, meaning the safety or the words to literally take that vest off, then we're just carrying it as it gets heavier and heavier. And what I'm going to share now is some, and again, for stick with my metaphors and my analogies here about that weighted vest. This is very preliminary because we just added a second part of this study where I'm collecting some data about experiences of these folks. And while this is very preliminary, what I'm hearing or what we're seeing in this survey data is the ways in which I think that weighted vest manifests and impacts these dads. What we're noting so far is clear declining rates in participation of counseling once babies and conception even starts. We have dads who were in counseling before, and once they're conceived, once there's conception, less are going to counseling. Once we're in the trimesters, less are going to counseling. And once these babies are born, less are going to counseling. So there's almost this idea, and this is pure hypothesis right here as I'm out here, is that, well, this is not the priority anymore. I have to prioritize them, her, the kids. I have to, or even external, making money, things like that. I have to prioritize other things beyond myself. These men are also reporting lower thresholds for stress and increased irritability, fatigue. Some have been reported increased consumption of alcohol or other substances, and general increases in anxiety. We're seeing all of this in Black dads right now. And I think what I want to close out on and make sure that we have plenty of time to talk to folks is what I think, or what we think in many ways, I feel comfortable speaking for these brothers, what we think is central to what we go from here. And I really think that there are two things. The primary thing that I think we need to focus on, and when I talk about we, I'm talking a lot about you all, in this chat, thinking of the women who are here, thinking of those who care about Black men, is fostering safety. How do we make safe environments where we can start to dismantle the parts of masculinity that aren't working while maintaining the parts of masculinity that are working. How do we allow for folks to talk about vulnerability and keep their ego strength going? And this is complex. I'm not giving direct answers here, and my hunches will talk it out a little bit, but fostering safety, the safety to be vulnerable, the safety to counter narrative, what people might expect of you or what you have been taught to expect of yourself. That safety, I think, is number one. And the second piece is sometimes finding the words. Sometimes folks literally don't have the words to express who they are. Dr. Hannon talked earlier, and this comes from a lot of my work with younger kids. Dr. Hannon talked earlier about the ways in which we are socialized and the emotions that we are socialized to connect with. And I think folks will think, well, I mean, y'all are educated, so y'all probably know this anyway. Y'all are smart. The more connected we are with certain aspects of ourselves, the easier it is for us to talk about it. This is why when we have children or kids, or even adolescents for that matter, who just haven't tapped into certain aspects of their world and their being, we do things like we have emotion cards, we have faces, we have all of these ways to help them communicate, here's how I'm feeling, here's what I need. I'm working literally in this moment right now, and Dr. Ferguson knows this because clinically, I mean, at this point, we probably should be in practice together as much as we talk about our clients. I'm working with a couple right now, and there is a man, it's a heterosexual relationship, and when I've shared with Dr. Ferguson, this man that I'm working with literally does not have the words or the capacity to tap into emotional language. He does not know how to say in depth how he feels beyond the simplest version of explaining, well, I'm upset. So, oh, say more. That was the more. That's all there is. And understanding and helping folks find the words, giving them the space to process the words without judgment. This goes back to safety. Sometimes can go a long way. I'm recognizing where we're at on time, and my hunches is that we all probably talked a little bit too much. So what I will do is I want to pull the brakes and let folks well, guide with whatever comes next. But thank you all. I appreciate you all.
I just want to jump right in and say, I don't know about everybody else, but I could listen to the three of you much longer. So please don't feel rushed in any kind of way. These people stay on these calls as long as we keep talking, and they're here to listen. So thank you all. You've done a fantastic job, and I'm going to be quiet. Go ahead, Dr. Hannon.
I didn't have anything specific to share. Again, I'm just grateful to be in community with y'all in this virtual space, sharing it not with just when Black women gather community, but certainly with my friends and brothers here. And we're happy to emerge for you as we chatted. Now, I'm realizing I have my internet is acting stupid these days. So hopefully I can stay clear, but certainly I see some folks raising their hands, but I'm going to fall back and yield the facilitation of questions to Michelle and her team. So I'll go on mute.
Yeah, we got you, Hannon. We got you.
Yeah, if I may,
We got you.
yeah, if I may, I wanted to bring up the name of the book again by Dr. Hannon, which is Black Fathering and Mental Health. And our two fantastic speakers have written chapters in that book. It's a compilation of stories by wonderful, wonderful authors. And I read the book. I'm so impressed with the book. Each chapter could have been its own topic for us to discuss here, as I had told our committee, Ms. Higgy and Kelthia. I mean, the topics range, and I was hoping you could share it, Michael, but since you're in and out, I'm trying to remember, and you guys might be able to help me, but I know there were topics about dads who lived in the house and dads that didn't live at home trying to father, and dads that were, I don't know what the proper word is, gay, but dads that were gay, and dads that had women that were non-Black that they were married to or had, families with. And I just was like floored with the breadth and depth of these stories and their personalized insights that they shared. And just the one story, was it you that shared how you weren't a dad just yet, but you had all of these influences around you? Right? It was you, Dr. Alfonso,
Dr.
right?
Ferguson. That was him.
Right. Yeah. And what captured my imagination was when you jumped into the SGL, I think it is, and the cisgender, and that just took me to a whole nother level. So I know there are questions, but I do want to give us several plugs for the book. And I'm so thankful you guys came. I was so excited for you guys. It's a treasure to see Black men, educated Black men in this field. I just can't express how excited I am about it if you can't tell by now. But anyway, so I guess we'll go to Q&A. Is that what you want to do, Ms. Hickey? You want to go with the question?
So let me see if I can find myself on here. Yeah, so this is what I want to do. And I see some female hands that are up, but I ask you to refrain. I want to hear from our men first. I'm trying to find my picture to bring me on screen. Can somebody add me to the spotlight? I can't even find myself. But yeah, so what I'm going to do is ask that we have our men speak to us first. And then we want to hear, obviously, from everybody, just like, first of all, I do something unconventional and ask you all to please, take yourselves off mute for just a minute to give our brothers a round of applause, because I just think they did a fantastic job. You can do it virtually. You can use your, that was just fantastic.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the sun is really doing a job on me here. So listen, this is what I want to do. I want us to talk to our men first. Men, if you don't mind, if you are willing to turn on your camera, I'm going to remove Michelle and and we're just going to have men on the, and then my co-host, if you could help add them all as spotlights so we can just see how many men are on this call, that would be great. So let me do this. I'm going to come out. I'm going to remove, Chip, you can help me with this, please. I'm not even asking you, Mr. Carroll. So as we are asking questions here, I'll be adding you all to the spotlight. For right now, Mr. Belton, I see that your hand is up, so please go ahead and ask your question. Dr. Nadrich, I think I said your name wrong, and Dr. Ferguson, I'm going to make you co-host so that you too can help me add men to the screen. I really want to spotlight our men who are in the circle.
Hello.
So go ahead, Gerald, what's your question?
Hello, I'd like to compliment the brothers for working in this profession. I think that you are greatly needed and you're a great asset for our community. I also wanted to ask a question of, are you familiar with individuals, especially who age out at 20, I believe it's 25 or 26 years old, using family counseling as a workaround to not having insurance. And I wanted to make that available for other people to be aware that this is an option that people can use. Perhaps even the grandparents usually have insurance as part of their retirements. I don't know if the insurance family counseling covers working with grandparents, but maybe it does. Maybe that's another way to work around not having insurance and getting counseling paid for. I also wanted to make a comment. I'm a retired police officer and I was also a detective for a while. And I also went on to become an attorney. And I've been greatly concerned about African American officers and African American men being stopped by the police. And a lot of times, most African American young men and men don't understand why they are being stopped. And one of the things that I have taken as a personal initiative is to explain or expose that there's a compensation situation involved where there's literally like a bounty on the head of all of us, but it ends up falling disproportionately on African-American men. Because when officers are paid an extra, when I retired in 2002, it was $250 for each court appearance or conference with the prosecutor. Now I'm sure with inflation and new contracts, it's over $300 to $350 per court appearance. Sometimes a court appearance only lasts 5 or 10 minutes. And if you went for, say, the entire morning or had another court appearance that afternoon, you would get, back in 2002, you would get an additional $150. And there were literally people living off of this $250 a day to $400 a day. This was how they survived, especially if they had gone through some type of divorce and they owed alimony and child support. The only way they could make extra money was to work in a foreign community, usually the Black community, and stop the African American and make this extra money. Now, I would like to also say that the majority of officers do not get paid to go to court or do not go to court. Majority, especially the officers who work during the day, is usually considered part of your daily shift if you have to end up sitting down at the court. However, if you're an officer who works in the evenings and you have an opportunity to go to court, it's a lot easier to make money going to court than it is to work security standing at a 7-Eleven or at any other business. So I just wanted to, I believe that a lot of African-American men feel picked on by the police and they feel persecuted, justifiably so. But they should understand that if you're doing something that's attracting attention to yourself and this officer has an opportunity to bring you in, he is turning down an incentive of several $100s for not arresting you. So you don't want to do anything to give him an opportunity to bring you in and make that extra money. This was something that I wanted to point out. I feel is being neglected and overlooked in the discussion about police excessive use of force and so forth. So I just wanted to mention those two things. And thank you very much. And like I said, compliments to the brothers for working in the field. It has been, I've looked into counseling, and it is not just for myself, but family and other people. And it's very hard to find African-American men who work in that area. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm trying to, I think I just messed up. Are you all seeing spotlights? Because did I just erase everybody's spotlight?
Yes, you did.
I'm trying to add Dr. Hannon in, but anyway, go ahead and answer his question and I'll redo it again. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just offer I'll offer two comments. You know, the first, you know, kind of PSA that you put out there about insurance is true. It's 26 is the age. Sadly, you know, anecdotally, I'll just say sadly, I was working with a young Black man who found me through his mother's insurance, and and this is part my fault also as a counselor, but when he turned 26, I only found out that he turned 26 when I got a rejected insurance claim that said that they weren't paying for his stuff anymore. And that's when he realized, oh yes, that's it. So yes, you can go through your parents or your guardians or whomever's insurance plan you are for kids, for young folk until you're 26 years old. And I think the only thing that I'll say with regarding the second part you shared about the police is, while I'm not, again, I'm trusting you on all the things you said about bonuses and whatnot, I'll also add the layer of bias that comes into this. You know, the narratives that people carry about who is committing crimes, who is doing the wrong thing, those perpetuate society broadly, and often the narrative of who we should be looking out for in terms of who is doing the wrong thing is usually put on Black folks, specifically Black boys. So while I hear a lot of things that you're saying, I just wanted to add that level of nuance there as well, is that the narratives of society play a huge role and an unfortunate role in that situation.
Okay. I saw Tom, your hand.
Yeah, good afternoon. You guys were just fabulous. It's for a guy that's 79 years old, will be 80 in 6 months, to be in a format like this with young brothers, and a young brother who's actually probably younger than my youngest daughter, came out of Willingboro. This is all just fabulous. And I just wanted to say that, and the question, I guess my ultimate question is going to be, because I got a lot of things on it, because I'm a Vietnam Marine Corps vet, and I was in the first group to go to Vietnam. So hoorah for the Marine down there in the corner. But I just wanted to say that a lot of things happened, from my perspective, to men through a lot of different areas as far as how they're socialized. And I came out of North Philadelphia, and it was socialized that weakness, or what was perceived as weakness, was not strength. And then I move on to the Marine Corps, where they basically made us into fighting machines. And we knew that we had weaknesses, because when we were in battles and in combat, men were crying. But we didn't see that as part of it. And so, but when you left that atmosphere or was around anybody else, you had to be that person that they perceived you as. And so one of the things that I'm really strong on, and I'm not blaming anybody about it, but this is something that I hate people to see and hear, when women call little baby boys, "Come here, little man." And they constantly, and they work like that, little man, and he's little man in the house all the way up, and he's a baby. And they treat him as if he's some kind of a man, and I just don't understand that concept. I'd like to get some answers on that. And then the other thing is, and this I guess is a bombshell, what role do you gentlemen place on that the church plays in how Black boys are socialized? Because I think that it's a very, very bad role overall, because of how young men are, what they see as leadership in the church, and how they're if they come in church as a child, how they're constantly trying to keep them down. Sit down, don't run, don't talk. And they've been there 2 hours, they're ready to play and run around and get up under the tables, and they want to jump over the pews, because they're made and built to do that. And so what role do you think that plays in how Black boys become Black men, which I think is one of the reasons why they never stay in church long? They might come back when they get to be 42, but during those time frames, why do they, what role do you think it plays in it, the socializing Black men? So that's my point on it. Anybody can answer that.
I'll jump in for the first one, little man. And so I think what's really interesting about that, and I spoke about this in my small tidbit around the adultification of Black folks. And I think that's one way it starts, right? This you have a child, little man, and little man is the man of the house since age 6 months. And how does that contribute to how he grew up to be a big man or a teen man, or there's actually no opportunities for him to be a boy, right? He was born a man, and so then that eliminates some of the things you're talking about on the second question, where like how does he get to be a boy? How does he get to play? How does he get to run? How does he get to do things? But also, how do you place like tools or opportunities for learning, limitations, and care for him if he's always the man of the house, or if he's always been a man? And so thinking about how that may impact someone in their adult life, going back to some of the things Dr. Hannon shared in his speaking portion, where he talked about socialization of boys and men, this idea of entitlement, this idea of, a range of emotions, because as a man, or as a little man, the expectation is you're only going to show these 1 or 2 emotions. And we've all seen it as well, going back to like the lust and or the anger, right? So little man got a girlfriend and he's 2 years old. This is a little girlfriend from across the street, things like that, that you're almost conditioned and socialized into having fit this mold from a very young age. Boys don't cry, like you man up. You know, as a little man, there are all these expectations that are placed on you that don't actually allow you to be a boy.
I'll jump in here, hopefully complimenting what Alfonso, Dr. Ferguson has been saying. And I think I want to, at the risk of muddying the waters, Mr. Thomas, I'm gonna say this. I think many of us can understand the adage of, you know, this is the man of the house, because to me that represents and suggests that there's a rite of passage that we want to celebrate, right? But the challenge that we have, and the thing that we have to continue to pay even more attention to, is what we'll all call, what is developmentally appropriate for this young boy? Is it developmentally appropriate to put on him, meaning even if it's just out of our mouths, that you're the man of the house now? Does he quite understand what it means to be the man of the house if he's 6? And is it fair for us to say, you are the man of the house? So we're thinking about if we're saying, you know, you've reached this other milestone, you went to school and you had a good day at 6 years old, heck yeah, we're going to celebrate that, because that's developmentally appropriate. If you engaged in behaviors that were collaborative and polite and expressive in ways that are healthy, then yes, we celebrate that. But we all know what we mean when we say you're the man of the house now. We're literally signaling by our words and our behaviors that we have an expectation that you're going to do some version of protecting the house, providing for the people in the house. And that's just not developmentally appropriate. And so I think about developmental appropriateness and what expectations we have for our children, going back to hopefully what we've all agreed to. Yeah, we can have expectations and we can celebrate the milestones. You rode your bike for the first time on 2 wheels. You know, you worked up enough courage to talk to the person you've been attracted to for the last 12 months, and you finally got the courage to talk to him, or finally got the courage to talk to her. Yeah, that's developmentally appropriate. We can celebrate those things. And maybe those are indications of becoming more of a man. But you ain't a man yet. I'm 47 years old, and I don't know if I'm a man all the time, right? So I'm thinking about developmental appropriateness, and wanting to celebrate milestones as a rite of passage. Those are all healthy things, but they have to be developmentally appropriate.
Thank you. I've been wanting to say that out loud for a long time.
Helen, I think Curtis has his hand raised.
No, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank the wonderful panel. I was invited on this opportunity just to be able to listen and just tune in. Myself, my name is Curtis Grayson III. I am, of course, a Black man, a heterosexual Black male, educator, over 25 years in art education. Background briefly, as far as, you know, African Studies degree, and also a studio art degree. What I realized in education, a lot of times we deal with so many dynamics of dealing with, as far as, you know, I explain to people when I deal with, as far as young men, especially, you know, our young Black men. I'm a father of 3 sons, 22, actually 24, 22, and 13, all male boys, you know, from the same mother, you know, at the time of my wife, just recently in transition or whatever, as far as divorce after 25 years. So even when I was in education early on, I was looked at as a unicorn, when my students would look at me and say, you know, all those are your sons, all by the same woman. So so many things was broken down in society, you know, of what a family structure should look like, what Black men should look like. You know, I've been even at fault of, you know, saying, you know, oh, if my child is playing a sport, you know, man up, you know, you have to start understanding or whatever of the dynamics of what's happening. You know, understanding as far as, you know, what that identity looks like, you know, as well. I think, you know, I was having conversations with a lot of my friends now, whatever, especially as a visual artist myself, and find myself now having to show, as far as strong Black male, as far as, you know, images, you know, heterosexual images, because it's almost like we're almost becoming like endangered species or whatever, you know, as far as that we can't still show our emotion and still our strength and be able to, you know, captivate and show that. definitely interested as far as for all of the panel discussions to be able to share their information or ways of contact. Because like I said, as I'm getting older, 53, don't look it, but I'm 53. And coming from, strong families, strong families that stay together, but my decision of making that decision, the divorce of, I was concerned about my mental health and wellness, being at that point where I said, is it healthy for me to still stay? To listen, as the brother was speaking about, as far as with church or whatever, did the church fail as well? If you went to some other church members, older elders or whatever, and to ask and try to get that information or whatever on how to succeed, you would just hear just the cliches like cheaply keeper to better to stay in for the long haul. But is that still problematic or whatever, or does that really help? So many people that's in those situations or those marriages or whatever, unhealthy in there. And until COVID took place, those things changed and brought things more to light. More people are stuck with each other instead of being away sometimes to be away from each other. Definitely, like I said, I would definitely like to have information from your brothers or whatever, as far as be able to reach out, to be able to talk, to share or get information or whatever, for myself and as far as for my child, because now my youngest or whatever has to deal with that, as dad not there, or every other weekend now. It's just so many things or whatever, I try to pour in a lot to like a lot of my students at school, to constantly, be advocates for them. What I realize or whatever, the dynamics of not just being an educator, but being a Black educator, being a Black male educator, what we deal with is even more profound. Dealing with as far as if I have any young Black males that I have any type of adversary to or whatever, or any type of aggression to, is because either the Black father wasn't there or whatever. So it's it's a pretty much a situation where they just constantly rebel against my authority. Same or whatever, or if the Black father was there and that Black male I'm connected with is because dad was there. So I remind them of that. Same as far as when I deal with as far as with our young Black girls in schools or whatever. If the young Black girl or whatever connects with me, pretty much dad was there. But if the dad was ostracized and that girl grew up or whatever hearing, because I teach at the high school level. So if that girl has always heard that the daddy isn't this, he hasn't shit, he hasn't, and he's asking whatever, then my voice is very foreign. My voice doesn't even mean anything to them. So I have to reprogram them, hopefully at that age or whatever. And then at the same time, or whatever, even when I teach as far as, with my students that are white students. So now I have to play against a stereotype of that Mr. Grayson doesn't sound like the rapper. He doesn't sound like the athlete. He doesn't sound like what I see on a video. He's different, or he's educated, or if I wear my full gear with my shirt and tie, my bow tie and everything, now he doesn't look like he's from here. And I'm like, yeah, I'm from Newark, but I teach in Maplewood, so we deal with so many different emotions or whatever. And I mean, I'll just end on, I don't want to take up any more time or whatever. Not even really I was just really enjoyed as far as this whole, conference, and I didn't want to miss it. Multitasking, taking care of my dinner for my sons and everything as well. But, it was just very powerful. But like I said, the stereotype is still, it's almost still there. It's still there as far as where we don't really want to go to counseling because, we want to keep everything in-house. The trauma, we keep everything in-house. We don't want to tell our business. But at the same time, it's starting to change. I hear more of our students now, whatever, that have 504s, that have IEPs or whatever, that are very prone, because listening to the adults or whatever, they're throwing out their diagnosis. Well, I have ADHD, I see with my counselor or whatever, and they're just in conversation, and it's very freely. Even that I have to still keep it private, but they're just very outspoken with their information, and because of social media and everything else and stuff, so it may be like a paradigm shifting at a certain point. And, just to touch even about as far as, with law enforcement, we have to still understand the historical reference, whatever, like I said, I'm a Black studies major, whatever. So police were founded or whatever from being slave catchers. Until we historically get to that point and understand, show me your papers, show me your ID, show me your paperwork, show me your ID, show me your driver's license. That is the same tradition. And unfortunately, we're trying to get people to understand it's not just a black and white thing. It is a blue thing. but that's another point. But as Black fathers, Black men are necessary. It is very important. It's very important or whatever. And, you know, even hats off for our women that always, you know, raise our sons when we're not around. But if we are, what about the ones that are around and the ones that's doing the work and still there? The things are still happening or whatever, you know. I mean, you know, my sons, you know, they're older, but they feel that they're at that peak, that they're grown men, that they don't need. I'm seeing a change of life. I'm 53, but I'm still helping taking care of my dad, you know, who's there. So I, like, my sons don't realize at the older age, I still need my dad when I was 21, when I was 31, when I was 41, and at 51 now, I'm pretty much taking care of him now, you know. But, you know, that absentee and it connects back to what the brother was saying about anger. Now you have young Black men taking a role of anger from of whatever the situation that may have happened, either if it was the woman that guided or fed information or whatever to, you know, to in a situation, whatever, corrupted or they're in a very controlling situation.
So Mr.
They can
Grayson,
control the narrative.
Mr. Grayson, I'm loving everything you're saying, but we got a couple
Yes.
of hands up behind you. So-
Thank you. No, I appreciate you're definitely the love and everything, but this
Oh,
is
no,
great.
and we're so happy you're here. Please come again.
I
Did
appreciate
anybody
it.
want to address some of what he said? I thought of you, Mr. Ferguson, Dr. Ferguson, when he first started talking, because I think you said that your father had 9 children and 2 continents, and talked to you guys 48 hours every day. Did I miss every 48 hours? You might, I don't know. Anyway, I thought.
Oh no, absolutely. You've clearly read the chapter. I love it. So yeah, my father has multiple kids from multiple women, and every decade or so a new one pops up. Not that they were born, but they were older than me, and they found us. And so, but in the same token, even though, you know, half his children were not raised in the home, were not raised by him once they were connected, and with his current children, he has great relationships with them. There was a point in my life where I spoke to my dad every day as an adult, on my way to class, on my way home, and he's my best friend. He knows everything about me, and we haven't lived in the same state or even the same city for about 15 years. And so it's absolutely possible to not be in the same house as your child, but also have a thriving relationship with them. I think when in the book chapter, I joked about if I don't talk to my father for more than 48 hours, he'll probably put out a missing person. Because if I don't talk to him, something must have happened to me. But there are a couple of things that I wanted to address in what you've shared, Curtis. Also, I'm in Newark, so we can obviously we can connect around like resources, mental health services. I see clients in New York or in New Jersey as well as New York. And I was recently appointed, I don't think this is in my bio, I'm one of the city commissioners here in New York. So we have an LGBTQ initiative that's happening, a task force. So we're being intentional on creating visibility and support for the queer community in the city of Newark. So we could talk about that. A couple of things that I really appreciated that you shared were this idea of you may not look or talk or present like some of the rappers, and this challenging this narrative of, depending on who you're talking to, the white kids, you know, they may see you a certain kind of way and say, hey, that doesn't fit based on what I see in the media. And or with the Black kids, whether it's your family structure or whatever, not fitting with some of those narratives. And one of the things that Dr. Nadrich and I have done work on, and Dr. Hannon and I have had conversations around, is like the Black experience is not monolithic, right? So I'm actually excited that you're showing up in a different way and creating another narrative and having other conversations with the leaders of tomorrow and the folks within your circle of today, right? Because we're not all the same. Literally looking at this screen right now, we're all from different walks of life, doing different kind of work, but can come together and be in community and build community. So I think there's power in being different. And there's power in being a unicorn, or there's power in being unique. And I think one of the parts that I talked about in my segment when I was speaking earlier is like this idea of Black men having to show up as fragmented selves, right? Having to show up as a part of us or a piece of us, depending on the space that we're in, and not being able to show up as all of us. And if we do show up as all of us, there's risk there, right? There's risk that someone may either try to hurt us or try to chop us down or whatever the case may be, or there's risk there that I'm giving my all to a situation, person, relationship, community, work, and I'm being taken advantage of or being mistreated. So there's risk there. But I think if we can get to a place where we're showing up as our whole selves in more than one space or other spaces and creating examples for the generations of tomorrow, then we can move and create a narrative for Black men not being monolithic. There's multiple ways to be a Black man, and this is just one way that I show up as a powerful Black man. So those are the tidbits that I got from what you shared and what I want to share.
Thank you. I know Khalil has had his hand up, and there's another gentleman that has a hand up, and I want to be respectful of our speakers' time. So if we can kind of keep the questions, pointed, that would be wonderful. But express yourself, but let's just be mindful of their time as well, okay? Thank you. Khalil.
Greetings, everybody. I'm Dr. Al Khalil Bey. I'm also a counselor therapist, and I'm also in my 70s, and I have been working for over 50 years. I'm also have a semi-retirement. I got a private practice. I'm working with the same clientele. I specialize in substance use disorders. Besides that, I'm also a person in recovery. I've worked in Baltimore, New York, St. Louis, and DC. I didn't see anything that anyone said that is not valid. I support it 100%. All have the same experiences. We've had the same experiences too many different times. I do deal with a lot of the trauma issues, and I make sure a lot of the people that come in to see me understand that they have trauma. Because a lot of people don't understand that they have trauma. They blame every single thing else and everyone else. Also make sure, particularly being February Black History Month, that they get introduced to their history. Not understanding that slavery didn't start, or our history didn't start as slavery. And I think that is really, 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 and it has proven to be really significant in me gelling and bonding and building a rapport with a lot of the people that come in with their trauma. Thank you for the work that you do. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Khalil.
Oh.
I
Appreciate that, Khalil. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Christopher, you had your hand up for a while as well. You still you have a comment? Is it Christopher Johnson? Did you want to make am I saying it right? Christopher Lewison? Did you still want to make a comment?
It's Jamil Johnson.
Oh, it says Christopher on my screen.
And Caroline.
Okay.
It's two names. Go ahead, Jamil.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's time. A couple things. I'm a father of 5, married father of 5. My oldest son is in college, and then I have my youngest are twin daughters that are just turned 10. I have purposefully tried to. There's a lot of things in my childhood were fantastic. I have my father married my mother, and when I was 3 years old, and he's been there the whole time. But I didn't realize about counseling or needing counseling until I was in my 40s, until after my mom passed away. And I was in the room crying. My dad came in and said, "You need to be celebrating." And I couldn't celebrate at that time. And it took a while for me to get to a point where I could celebrate. Nevertheless, so there's a lot of things in my childhood. Like we grew up, I didn't grow up in the church, but we came to the church later. And there were things as a young man that the men in my family wanted me to pursue. And I'm speaking kind of vaguely because a lot of my kids are in the room, but they wanted me to pursue, but they also wanted me to be a man of integrity, which I saw the conflict of that. So as I started to raise my boys, I was 100%. I was like, look, there's a lot of things that come with this that is not worth that. And so you have to make that decision, and I'm raising you a certain way. So I hope you choose this decision over the other, because I don't want you to have to go through some of the things that me and some of my friends and whatnot have gone through. That being said, talk to the counselors, as I also have. So I have a son that's 19, and I'm dealing with him in a different way. But I'm looking at my 14-year-old and my 11-year-old and young boys, and I'm trying to figure out like the process to connect. So like I know counselors, you guys go through like some kind of process to connect, and then you start building things. And by the grace of God, I've been building with all of my children, but my oldest son is a lot more like me, where I can be very direct, and he takes it in a manner that I would take it. It's like, okay, this is what dad wants me to do, or this is advice. But my 14-year-old and my 10-year-old are different. And so I needed a different process to help connect, because ultimately I don't want them to be like my oldest son. I just want them to be healthy, and help them navigate. So if there's a process or some kind of suggestion you all would have for connecting with my other two boys and my daughters, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I ask Dr. Nadrich to address that? Because I'm thinking from your chapter where you talked about men telling you to behave one way or do as I do, but don't, and showing up another way. I mean, that's what came to mind when I heard this question.
I mean, thank you for reading my chapter. I'll take that. First of all, thank you for sharing with us. And so two things came to mind as I was listening to what you were saying, and then while these two things that I'm going to say are not direct responses, I'm going to try to follow up with a direct response. The first thing that I heard as you were talking about it, and I did warn about these metaphors I like to use, is I'm wondering about whether or not we are able to speak the same language for some of our children. It sounds like your native tongue is congruent with, and your eldest son you're fluent with your eldest son, and it sounds like we're not fluent with some of the younger kids. So the question that I would ask is, how do we, and this is the educator in me when I teach my students, is that how do we bridge the gap? And in this situation is how do I learn to speak the same language as these children, which is not my native tongue? So whether that means we have to focus on emotional communication or disclosure or whatever that is, in some ways my direct recommendation is try to have open conversations about the ways in which your children want to communicate, how they feel heard, and then try to reciprocate that back. So in some ways, this is me talking to my students here, is play with them, try different ways of communicating with them, ask them what they're looking for, what they value in communication. I talk a lot about values, and when I teach my students is how do we connect with what these children or what people value? This way we can frame what we're trying to say in what they value. And the other thing I'm going to say here is, and I'm going to preface it by saying that this is a little, this might be challenging to when you are seeking empowerment, is we also have to recognize that our children might not be ready to hear us. And that's another part of what the challenge is of being an adult. It might not matter what language you say it in, how loud you say it, how soft you say it, how many memos you leave, how many text messages, Instagram posts, TikTok video. I don't know what else kids are doing on social media now. Dr. Ferguson knows, but I don't know it. It might not matter what you say. It might not be ready to be received. And that's a disempowering place to be for any human, especially a parent. So in moments like that, I think what I would, this is me stepping a little bit into the therapist role, is if I heard a client say this, I would nudge them to think about, well, is there a point where you felt like you could say it? There's no other way differently for you to say it. How do you know if you've gotten to that point? It doesn't mean stop. It just means there's a mental piece inside of you that's saying is I'm literally trying everything. And that's an acknowledgement that there's another process here. We can't make people do anything. We are not that powerful. So the question is did we do everything that we could? And if we did, that's where we might want to give ourselves a little bit of grace about what we're trying to do. Now, I hope that's helpful. And
Hey, a shout out to my homies over there, Carolyn. I know that was your husband. North Carolina represented in the house. Thank you. Okay, I see a hand for John. John, you've been waiting very patiently. Thank you.
Okay, hold on just a second. Okay, all right. So I missed almost the entire presentation. I'm so sorry. But when I did log in, what I heard was wonderful. I am a 35-year educator. I've been in teaching in the DC public schools for about 12 years. Then I taught at Columbia University Teachers College. I've been mentoring young men for almost the exact amount of time that I've been in the profession, my entire adult life. And I don't have any biological children, and I'm same gender loving. And that has been something that has grounded me in my work with Black males, because I feel very strongly that Black men should be involved in helping our young men mature through guidance, through interaction, all those things. But as a same gender loving Black man, it's been very kind of tricky in terms of my acceptance with mothers, with fathers, with different people in the community because of that. But listening to the tail end of what I've heard some of the presenters say, I forget who the person was, the fact that our community is not a monolith. We are so diverse. And it's wonderful to be affirmed that in our mosaic and in our stellar galaxy of people, we can all contribute to the well-being of Black people. And I just wanted to add that little tidbit of a comment, because I'm very glad to hear that our community is slowly changing in terms of embracing all of our people, and particularly Black men, and how masculinity is represented. So I just give kudos to the presenters and what I've heard other people book discussed tonight or this evening.
I'm sorry?
The title of the book.
I was just gonna, if I may, I was just gonna bring it right back up. That was a good segue. Black fathering and, oh my God, I just forgot. And mental health. Is that right, Michael? Come on here, help me out.
Yep. I was going to say, yeah, Black Fathering and Mental Health. I put the link in the chat a few times. You can order it directly from the publisher's website. You can also find it on Amazon and other more widely used publishing websites, but I would recommend going directly to the publisher's website. And I'll put it in the chat one more time. And I just want to make sure I say, so the book is an edited volume. It's not a single author. So I invited people to contribute chapters, and we've talked about Dr. Nadrich's chapter, Dr. Ferguson's chapter. The unique thing about the book is that a few unique parts of the book. One, it centers the voices of Black fathers and father figures, right? I don't know that there are many other books on the market that do that. But the other thing is that everybody who wrote a chapter is a professional counselor. And so each chapter not only talks about our experience in aspiring to have children and our hopes to have children, but it talks about those lived experiences and then makes recommendations for mental health professionals who might have Black father clients who are at the same developmental point in their lives. And so we have folks talking about aspiring to have children. We have folks talking about being same gender loving and their aspirations to bring children into the world that will be affirmed. We have folks talking about infancy, getting ready for early childhood, raising teenagers and the challenges and the victories that come at that point in time, and fathering adult children. And every single chapter is written to include recommendations for mental health professionals if they have Black father clients who may be at the same milestone in their lives. And so I love it. I'm deeply grateful for the folks who contributed, including Tyce and Alfonso, and welcome you to pick it up and your feedback. And so we'll put the link back in the chat to make sure you know how to access it. So that's a bit more about the book.
And if I may, I finished the book yesterday and I was just in awe. As I said earlier, I think each chapter could be its own topic. I mean, that's how, you know, the depth and breadth of it was just tremendous. But if you guys could stick with us a little bit longer, Michael, I wanted to know if you could chat about fathering children with autism, or I don't know the correct terminology, or children that are, whatever the correct terminology is. There was one chapter that really got me, and it was the brother that talked about how he was, I guess, an ex-military guy, and he was mucho. I came with he was mucho macho, and he's getting ready to have these sons, and his sons were autistic, and his whole paradigm shifted because, you know, he and his wife were, you know, she was a rising superstar in her business, and he was a rising superstar in his business. I think they're from North Carolina, actually, and in the Fayetteville area. And how, you know, I just was stunned just thinking about what he might have been going through as a father who had all these ideas of playing football with his kids and basketball and all this, and his son was born, and then they realized he had some challenges, and what that did to the relationship between the doctor and his wife, with the relationship with his other children. If you could speak to that, if you would, please. Thank you.
Oh, you've done a great job, Michelle. What I'll try to contribute is this. So I have my own lived experience. My wife and I have two, like I said, dope adult children, Black adult children, one of whom is autistic. Our son Avery is autistic. And so I have my own lived experience with that, both on our therapeutic journey, on my own personal therapeutic journey, getting therapeutic support so that I can be the right kind of dad, at least most days, for my son. The chapter that was written in the book is from a good brother. His name is Eric Williams. He is a licensed doctoral level clinician, and he and his partner, he and his wife have twin autistic sons. And he details beautifully his own journey toward acceptance, right? And being able to say, I accept my sons in their full humanity. There's nothing deficit about being autistic. And even the conversation earlier about learning our children's language, and learning how to communicate with our children in ways that they can hear us instead of us just having to hear them. So Eric Williams does a wonderful job. It is arguably, I don't know if there's a best chapter. I'm just grateful that the brothers and the people said yes to my invitation, because it's absolutely compelling. And so that's part of what you'll get in the book. This Black man who happens to be a therapist, a marriage and family therapist, licensed in North Carolina, ex-military, talking about his journey with his partner, doing his best to be the right kind of father for his children, and the challenges and the victories that were part of that process. So hopefully that gives you some insight.
Thank you.
So Nicole had her hand up for a long time. I don't know if you still have a question, Nicole. Are you still with us?
I'm still here trying to make dinner too. Wow, this is awesome. But I'm trying to I'm coming at this approach from a mom. I'm in the midst of a divorce, and I have a 15-year-old. And one of the things I struggle with is understanding or being able to differentiate between my son coming into his own, so therefore needing to separate from me to a certain extent, versus there's something going on and I need to probe and I need to push. How do I understand the difference? How do I recognize the difference?
I think we're all quiet because there's no one answer for that. And
Okay.
so what I immediately think about is a couple of things. So one, I think about leaning on the foundation you have, the relationship foundation you have with your child, you as a parent, them as a child, and how you've socialized them or conditioned or supported them in being able to come to you when there's something, right? Trusting that the bond in the relationship is strong enough that if something is coming up, then he's gonna reach out. And if that's not, if you don't have full confidence that's there, I'm wondering what it would look like to have a conversation, to like have some understanding as to what it looks like when you need support. How can I support you? And this is how I want to show up for you. And, or this is how I want you to let me know. What are the signs of you letting me know that you need help? That's one hand. And then on the other hand, I think about, I've had clients, young adults who are either living at home and or transition out of the home, and there's a difficulty with them and the parent in reframing and revamping that adult to adult relationship, child parent relationship. And so that requires some conditioning too, in regards to, as a parent, it may be uncomfortable or difficult for you to be able to pull back in a way that supports the child to like step out on their own, right? And it goes back to the other thing I shared in trusting that the foundation is there. They know right from wrong. They're able to do right, and or they're able to seek support when they need support from you. But knowing or trusting that you've done all you can or needed to do as a parent. That's my 2 cents, based on the clients that I've had. But Tyce, you look like you had some other things to share.
No, I'm super grateful because as you talked about it, I was formulating my words, and I'm really close, if not mirroring what you were saying. And so Nicole, I heard you talk about this idea, and I'm picking on your words a little bit, but I'm going to nudge and say there is something going on. And I think that's the thing that we have to acknowledge, is that there's almost always something going on, especially at that age, especially with what you've shared. So there's absolutely something going on. What I hear you saying, though, is you want to know when or if it's the real something's going on, like there's something seriously going on. And in some ways, I'm going to share something that's very akin to what Dr. Ferguson just shared. And it's an analogy. Again, I told you I'll be doing analogies sometimes. I think about parents that I've worked with when they are sending their kids off to college or letting their kids go out on excursions for the first time. And what I often nudge parents do is set up code words. And the code word that happens is that the child is able to send this parent this innocuous, benign thing that signals, that says, I need support now. And what happens then is the parent intervenes in a way that shields the child. So again, let's say the child is off at a party, something like that. It's too much. Send the code word. I say this, parent calls, I need you to come home right now, da, 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 da. Now the parent's the bad guy, right? The bad person, and the child's allowed to leave in a safe way. In some ways, and this is what Dr. Ferguson was saying, is finding a way to communicate, hey, you're at this age, you're at this developmental status, there's a lot going on. How can we develop when there's a code word that you can say to me, it's real now, like whatever is happening, it's getting real, so that I know, drop everything, come running, be ready, as opposed to what we're going to call the ebb and flow of what it means to be of that age, be of that developmental status, be going through what your family's going through. How do we differentiate from the traditional or the within permitted boundary ebb and flow, and we've exceeded that boundary? It's getting real now, like this is worthy of intervention. Having that conversation might be the most empowering way for both of you to go forward, because now you're empowered in saying, I'm going to trust my child to communicate this, and they are empowered in choosing to say, now's the time, now's when I need something more than it. I think that might be a mutually empowering way to go forward.
And if I can, this is all wonderful, and some of it, and he loves blueberries. So we have that word. We have sour blueberries. That's the key word. So I know that there's something going on. But one other question. Yes, the divorce is very traumatic for him and his siblings. And also he's going through, his body is foreign, his voice is changing. And then on top of that, he's no longer perceived. We live in a very diverse community. He's no longer seen as a cute little Black boy. Now he becomes a threat. He's being perceived as a male. So all of that's going on, which adds to my next question. I haven't been able to find a Black male counselor, which is what he has requested. So I found what I thought was the next best thing. It is a counselor who's worked in an inner city area. But my son says, it's a waste of time. I don't feel comfortable sharing things and matters concerning race and things of that nature. So do I just leave it alone until I find what he's looking for, or do I say something's better than nothing?
My immediate thought is, where are you looking?
And within my insurance,
Sure.
what's available to me through my insurance.
Sure. Earlier I dropped a couple of like sites in the chat. It's many moons ago at this point, but
Yeah.
a lot of those websites you can filter by insurance as well.
Okay.
So you don't have to only look through the list that your insurance agency gives you or your insurance company gives you. You can go to those not faculty, but those directory websites and be able to pull folks from there and filter it by insurance and gender and race, all the things.
Okay.
The other thing I would encourage you to consider, Nicole, is that if your son is of high school age, then his school counselor and folks in the school, if you have any trust in them, they may be also able to refer to sources in the community. So you can find support potentially in the school, and you can lean on the school if you trust them to make referrals to folks in the community that may not be at the fore for you, but maybe at the fore for them. So it may be a bit of taking one extra step to see if there's other referral sources.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for all of this. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. We're gonna, first of all, we need to be mindful. I'm gonna ask our guests. I know it's 6:15, so I know you guys are ready to rock and roll, and I'm hungry too, so we're on the same page. So can I ask you for just 15 more minutes, because I do want to give women, because we heard from the men, my sisters will talk bad about me if I don't let them talk tonight. Is that okay?
That's a little tough for me. I know I've got some obligations in the next now.
Oh, okay.
And unfortunately, I apologize. I've had
I understand. I understand. We are going long. So do you all have to leave? And I respect that too. Can any of you stay? No.
I got two young kiddos waiting for me right now. I gotta be out.
So let me say this. I see a hand up on the phone, and that was other thing. So let me just say this, that I appreciate more than you can possibly know that you all came and shared this time with us, and I'm not going to abuse it. Ms. Shakur, I'm sorry, but we'll get to you the next time if that's okay.
Oh, it'll have to be okay.
Yes.
But thank you, brothers, very much. Appreciate it.
Let me just say that I thank you guys for coming. I thank everybody for showing up today. I thank, I can't find Michelle. I'm trying to highlight her as well. I thank Michelle and Michelle, can you add yourself to the spotlight, because I can't find you. I thank Michelle and Kilthea for proposing this and putting it together. And as I said at the beginning of this conversation, I foresee many. I see more continuation of not only this conversation, but just conversations in general of us as Black folks, Black men, Black females. I think the parenting, not forget the fathering, but parenting as Black folks, we need to talk about that as well. So on that note, I'm just gonna say, Michelle, bringing you in. I'm going to did you want to give a final thank you, Michelle, so we can let them go?
I thought you guys were outstanding. Thank you, Dr. Hannon, for agreeing to bring yourself and these two fantastic brothers who have fantastic chapters, by the way, in the book. And your book, your chapters as well. It's just been in my honor to have you guys, just to be in your presence. I'm just so thrilled and thankful that you were able to share with us today. I think everybody got I'm getting a lot of comments on my phone about wonderful presentation. This has been fantastic. So just kudos to you guys.
Thankful, great comment, and please come again. And I'll be reaching out to all of you individually. Hope you don't mind. But before we let them go, can we just sign out? Can I ask you all to unmute, and we can do what we do every week, please?
Thank you, brothers, so much. Thank you, Helen, for facilitating this.
Thank you so much. So I see people are not unmuting, so I'll just end us out as we always do. We usually end with saying when Black women gather, but today is when Black people gather. What happens, folks?
Amazing
Amazing things happen.
Everybody.
Amazing things happen.
Amazing
Amazing things happen.
Amazing
Amazing things happen.
Everything.
And today
Willenboro
was,
made me proud.
Fantastic things
Yes.
Hey,
and
I'm
today
for
was
Willenboro.
the reception. So I hope you guys are
Willenboro
feeling
made
the
me
love.
proud.
Please come again. And on that note, I'm going
it's
to
good to
stop
see a young
recording.
person that looks just like my children. Because they all are just like that. Willenboro is no
Thank
joke
you.
back in the day.
Thank you,
Bye,
gentlemen.
guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
On that note, I'm
Thank
going to stop
you.
recording. And you guys, thank you so much. Please come again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Appreciate
Peace
y'all.
out.
Thank you,
for having
Helen.
us.
Great.
Thank you.